Hello! I'm so glad you're joining me today. I'm telling stories of knowing Jesus in a new way because it's Eastertide. Remember our calendar? Easter is not just one Sunday. It flows over into 6 more Sundays. And we're telling stories about knowing Jesus in a new way during Eastertide. So let's get ready to hear this story. Let's just sit back, get comfortable, maybe sit crisscross applesauce. Take a deep breath and listen. Last time we heard the story about the empty tomb, about the women and the disciples finding the tomb empty, nothing there. Jesus was gone. But yet they felt his presence in his absence. Then we told the story about how later in that same day, 2 disciples were walking the road from Jerusalem to Emmaus and met a stranger that told them all about things that helped them understand the cross and the empty tomb. They asked him to stay for supper in the inn in Emmaus. And when he picked up the bread and gave thanks to God and broke it and shared it with the men, they knew it was Jesus. And then he was gone. They had known Jesus in the breaking of the bread. Today, we hear about knowing Jesus in our doubts. The disciples were locked up in a room one dark, dark night. They had locked the doors because they were scared of the Roman soldiers. They thought they would take them away just like they had taken Jesus away. But then they heard, "Peace, my peace be with you." And they thought they were seeing a ghost. But they saw the wounds of Jesus. And he asked for them to give him some fish to eat. Then he said, "My peace be with you." And he left. Now Thomas was not there when all this happened. And when they told him the story, he said, "I don't believe." He had doubt in his bones. But why shouldn't he have had doubt? Everyone was having to stretch their minds. Stretch their minds big enough to know Jesus in this new way. Then about 8 days later, Thomas was with the group, again in a room where the doors were locked. And they heard, "Peace be with you." And Jesus was with them. And he walked straight toward Thomas. And he said, "Touch me." But Thomas fell to his knees and said, "My Lord and my God." And Jesus said, "Have you believed because you saw me?" Then he looked out at the rest of the group around the circle, and he said, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Remember in our earlier story, the disciples had been told to go to to go to Galilee. And they did. Now the trip from Jerusalem to Galilee took about a week. And when they got there, they went to the Sea of Galilee. They went to the sea because as boys they had fished with their fathers there. And they went out on a boat. And they fished all day and all night. But they didn't catch anything. But they were still comforted by the smell of the sea, by the sights around them, because this was their home. Then early in the morning, they looked out across the Sea of Galilee, and they saw a fire coming from the beach. And a stranger was standing beside the fire. The stranger said, "Have you caught any fish?" And they said, "No." And he said, "Try casting your nets on the other side of the boat." And what did they have to lose? They did it anyway, not expecting anything. But then they felt the great rush of fish, and their nets were full of fish. Now John was not paying attention to the fish. He was looking at the man on the shore. Then he shouted out, "It is our Lord." And Peter jumped up, jumped out the boat, swam through the sea to the shore. When his feet touched the sand, he ran to the bank. The others turned the boat in the direction of the shore. And as they went ashore, the man said, "Bring some fish." And they did. And when they gathered around the fire, they knew it was Jesus, but they were too scared to say anything. "Have some breakfast," he said, and he gave them fish and bread to eat. Then he began to talk to them, especially to Peter. "Do you love me?" "Yes, I love you," said Peter. "Then feed my lambs." Then again, "Do you love me?" "Of course I love you." "Then tend my sheep." "Do you love me?" "You know I love you." "Then feed my sheep." Then Jesus began to talk about things that would happen. How Peter would grow old and need help, but others would lead him in a direction he did not want to go. Later, they began to think that Jesus was telling Peter about how he would die as an old man in Rome. Then Jesus said, "Follow me." And Peter got up and followed Jesus along the shoreline. And he looked behind and saw John running to catch up with them. And Peter asked, "Jesus, will he die also like the rest of us?" And Jesus said, "It is not for you to know." Peter was silent, and then Jesus was gone. Now, I wonder, is there something that this story made you think of? Is there something in your house, something you've drawn, or something in this room that you might want to bring to this story? Think about it. The story of Thomas and his doubt. Then think about this story. The story of finding Jesus in the morning, of knowing Jesus that morning when they'd been out fishing all night long and had caught no fish. Is there something in your house that you might want to bring to this? Something that you feel belongs here? What about this room? Do you remember anything in this room that you might want to bring to this story, to either of these stories? One thing I think about when I think of the story of Thomas and his doubts, I think about the Good Shepherd and how he sought the lost sheep. He went and found the lost sheep. And one thing I think about with this story about knowing Jesus in the morning, I think about another story that has to do with the ship. If y'all remember, here's the ship we used for the story of Jonah. How Jonah went to sea. Now, I wonder, what part of this story did you like the best? What part of this story did you like the most? The story about Thomas and knowing Jesus in his doubts. Or this story, what did you like best about this story? About the fishermen knowing Jesus in the morning as they woke from the dark night and had breakfast with Jesus on the beach. Talk to the people in your family. Talk about what you liked best or remembered most about these stories. And let me know what you said. Or maybe you can draw a picture. Thank you for joining me today. Goodbye.